the two. But obviously, at some point, there's probably going to be a lot more pressure and responsibility from my other side of my life. At the moment, I'm juggling the two of them and a young.
Prince William and Catherine just caught Buckingham Palace completely off guard. They released a sudden statement that strips Queen Camilla of her future authority. While King Charles rested, private legal papers were quietly signed behind closed doors. William drew a non-negotiable line tonight, leaving Camilla's inner circle scrambling. The balance of power inside the royal family just shifted forever. The quiet document signed in the shadow of Highgrove. A black leather folder left Kensington Palace in an unmarked sedan just past 11 at night. The courier drove straight toward the Gloucestershire countryside under total media blackout. Inside that folder sat a 12-page legal charter bearing 2 fresh signatures. Prince William had signed on the right margin in the dark blue ink. Catherine, Princess of Wales, signed directly beside him. By midnight, the document rested on a mahogany desk inside Highgrove House. King Charles was sleeping upstairs when the package arrived. His personal staff had no warning. They were told only to place the folder in the King's morning dispatch box. But this was not routine correspondence about estate management or charity patronage. This was a binding strategy document designed to reshape the inner workings of the royal court. The paperwork targeted the growing operational reach of Queen Camilla. Over the past year, her personal office had quietly expanded its authority. Her advisors were taking over key planning sessions for upcoming international tours. They were influencing household staff appointments across multiple royal residences. They were even weighing in on how official funds were allocated for private security details. William and Catherine decided to act. They spent 3 weeks drafting the charter, alongside a tiny team of senior constitutional lawyers. They bypassed the standard palace communication channels entirely. Not a single copy went to Clarence House. No draft was shared with the Lord Chamberlain's team. The core of the document establishes a strict operational boundary. It explicitly strips Camilla's private office of any veto power over future succession planning. It revokes her team's ability to clear official appointments inside the Duchy of Lancaster. Most importantly, it creates a permanent board of trustees to oversee all royal property transfers. William and Catherine will hold 2 of the 3 seats on that board. The move caught palace officials completely flat-footed. Early the next morning, senior private secretaries gathered for what was supposed to be a standard weekly briefing. Instead, they were handed printed summaries of the new charter. The room went silent. One senior aide immediately picked up a secure phone line to contact the King's personal legal counsel. Charles woke to find the document already placed on his breakfast tray. Attached to the front was a handwritten note from his eldest son. The message was brief. It asked the King to review the terms before his scheduled 11 o'clock meeting with the Prime Minister. The timing was deliberate. William knew his father was exhausted from a demanding schedule of medical treatments and public appearances throughout early 2026. The Prince of Wales was not asking for a debate. He was presenting a finished framework. Catherine's involvement in the document marked a sharp turn in her public strategy. For months, royal watchers believed she was stepping back from high-level palace disputes to protect her health. But behind the scenes, she was actively helping draft the new guidelines. She personally insisted on adding a specific clause regarding the historical royal archives and court jewels. That clause guarantees that the Princess of Wales assumes direct custody of all historic royal collections the moment the current reign ends. It prevents any temporary transfer or long-term loan of those assets without her written consent. Panic spread through Camilla's quarters at Clarence House by mid-morning. Her chief of staff tried to reach the Lord Chancellor's office to question the legality of the document, but the lawyers had already verified its validity. Because the charter deals directly with the management of the heir's private estates and future sovereign assets, William was well within his legal rights to enforce it. Camilla's team realized they had been completely outmaneuvered. They had spent months building an ideological buffer around the king, placing trusted allies in key administrative positions across Buckingham Palace. In a single stroke, William and Catherine rendered those positions meaningless. As the news filtered through the corridors of power, a major question began circulating among senior courtiers. What specific line in that 12-page charter made the king's personal private secretary immediately halt its wider distribution to the household? The answer lies deep within Clause 4. That section deals with emergency governance. It explicitly details what happens if the monarch becomes physically unable to fulfill his daily duties for an extended period. Under the old protocol, the Queen Consort would sit on the Council of State alongside the next adult in line to the throne. William's new charter fundamentally changes that dynamic. It mandates that any major constitutional decision made during a royal health crisis requires the explicit, written joint approval of both the reigning monarch's office and the Prince of Wales. Camilla could no longer vote as a single bloc with Charles's private secretaries. This effectively removed her ability to act as the primary gatekeeper to the throne. If the king's health required him to step back, William would automatically assume operational control of the state apparatus. Camilla would retain her title and ceremonial duties, but her administrative authority would drop to zero. The king's private secretary saw the clause and recognized its historical weight instantly. If that page leaked to the press, it would signal to the world that the palace was actively preparing for a regent. He ordered every physical copy of Clause 4 locked inside a fireproof safe in the Privy Purse office. Meanwhile, Catherine's signature on the document raised its own immediate set of questions. Why did the Princess of Wales insist on signing a constitutional charter that traditionally only required the heir's seal? Her signature was not just a show of solidarity with her husband. It was a calculated legal maneuver. By signing as a co-principal, Catherine legally tied her personal office at Kensington to the execution of the charter. If anyone attempted to challenge or overturn the document in the future, they would have to face a legal challenge from her independent estate as well. Catherine was sending an unmistakable signal to the old guard at the palace. She is not merely supporting the future king from the sidelines. She is actively co-authoring the rules of the next era. By 2 in the afternoon, the tension inside the royal household reached a boiling point. King Charles summoned William to a private sitting room overlooking the gardens at Highgrove. Camilla was not invited to the room. The door was locked from the inside, and footmen were ordered to clear the hallway. The confrontation lasted less than 40 minutes. William emerged first, walking briskly toward his waiting car with a look of absolute composure. He did not speak to the waiting staff. 5 minutes later, the king called for his private secretary. The folder was still sitting on the table, open to the final page. The signature line for the king remained blank. But Charles had not rejected the charter either. He had simply set it aside to ask his son one final, agonizing question before the afternoon ended. Why Catherine stood her ground behind closed palace doors. A heavy wooden box arrived at Adelaide Cottage on a cold Tuesday morning in February 2026. Inside were 3 leather-bound ledger books containing the full inventory of the royal collection. Attached to the cover was an administrative notice from the Lord Chamberlain's office. It requested the immediate transfer of 4 historic diamond brooches back to the main vault at St. James's Palace. The brooches had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. Before her death, she had verbally gifted those specific pieces to Catherine for future state occasions. But the request form sitting on the kitchen table carried a new signature stamp. It came directly from Queen Camilla's senior lady-in-waiting. Catherine did not call her private secretary. She did not return the ledgers. Instead, she drove herself straight to Windsor Castle to inspect the vault logs in person. The archive books revealed a quiet pattern. Over the previous 8 months, 6 major historic items had been reallocated. Their destination codes all pointed to Clarence House. Among them were pearl earrings originally belonging to Queen Victoria and an 18th century emerald suite. None of these moves had been flagged in the quarterly household reports sent to Kensington. This was not a disagreement about jewelry. It was a calculated effort to establish institutional precedent. In royal legal tradition, the Queen Consort who controls access to the historic archive controls the visual identity of the monarchy. Catherine realized a quiet boundary had to be set. She scheduled an unannounced meeting with the keeper of the information vaults. She presented 2 historical ledgers from 1952. The documents clearly showed how Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was required to hand over formal administrative custody of state jewels to the new queen immediately upon her husband's death. Catherine made her point using those exact historic records. The current Queen Consort holds lifetime use of state assets, but not permanent administrative ownership. That authority belongs strictly to the line of succession. While Catherine laid out the historical facts in Windsor, an anonymous leak surfaced in the London media. A detailed report appeared in a major Sunday paper outlining internal friction over court appointments. The story named two of Camilla's closest advisors and claimed they were seeking lifetime consultancy roles inside the household. Palace officials immediately suspected Kensington. The timing seemed too convenient, but the actual source was far closer to the king's own inner circle. An officer inside the Lord Chamberlain's office had leaked the information. He had watched Camilla's team draft contracts that extended past the current reign. He knew those agreements would legally bind the next king to pay long-term salaries out of the civil list. The officer leaked the details to force an internal audit before the papers could be finalized. The audit opened 3 days later. It uncovered 4 unauthorized employment extensions drafted for Camilla's personal staff. The discovery gave Catherine the exact leverage she needed. She met with Prince William in his study that same evening. She laid out the inventory logs alongside the audit findings. She told him that allowing these precedents to stand would weaken their own authority before their reign even began. William agreed. He authorized the drafting of the Highgrove Charter that very night. Catherine's insistence on including the Archives Clause was a masterstroke. It permanently locked the historical collections under the joint management of the Prince and Princess of Wales. No item can be moved, restored, or reassigned without 2 signatures from Kensington. The day after the document reached Highgrove, staff at Clarence House attempted to process a routine requisition for a pair of historic diamond tiaras. The vault's digital system automatically flagged the request. A red notification appeared on the screen, requiring authorization from Kensington Palace before the safe could be opened. Camilla's staff was stunned. The new system was already live. By late afternoon, news of the vault lockout reached the king's private apartments. Charles was forced to acknowledge that his daughter-in-law had outmaneuvered his household's administrative team without raising her voice once. Catherine had successfully protected the crown's most valuable heritage assets. But her actions ignited a fierce secondary battle inside the palace walls. How would Camilla's inner circle react when they realized their access to future royal planning was being systematically shut down across every department? An executive directive that rewrites the rules of the crown. A white press release envelope hit the central table inside the Buckingham Palace Media Center at precisely 8 in the morning on March 3, 2026. Attached to the front was a strict embargo notice. The document contained a joint public statement from the office of the Prince and Princess of Wales. It did not carry the traditional royal crest of the combined households. It bore only the single feather badge of Kensington. The statement announced a total restructuring of the royal warrant system and the management of major royal trusts. Starting immediately, Prince William and Catherine were taking direct operational control over the approval of all commercial endorsements tied to the royal family. They were also establishing a new executive committee to oversee the financial management of the Duchy of Cornwall and its associated historical properties across England. To the general public, the announcement sounded like a routine update on royal administration and charitable operations. But inside the palace, every staff member recognized the true target of the directive. For decades, the monarch held sole authority over issuing royal warrants to tradesmen, luxury brands, and traditional suppliers. When King Charles ascended the throne, Queen Camilla was granted her own power to issue warrants to favored businesses. Her office quickly began compiling a list of classic British brands, interior design firms, and countryside suppliers to receive her personal royal stamp. William and Catherine's new directive effectively froze that list. The charter established that any brand receiving a royal warrant must meet strict, modern environmental and financial standards set by Kensington. If a supplier failed to pass the new audit board, their warrant would be revoked. William and Catherine personally appointed all 5 members of that audit board. This meant Camilla's office could no longer hand out official warrants without passing through a screening process controlled entirely by her stepson. The structural shift did not stop at commercial warrants. The directive also reassigned the governance of the Royal Collection Trust. Under the old rules, the reigning monarch and queen consort held primary administrative oversight over the management of historic properties, including Holyrood Palace and Balmoral Castle. The new framework officially transferred operational oversight of those properties to a joint executive council. William was named chairman of the council. Catherine was named deputy chair. Camilla was assigned an honorary advisory seat with no voting rights. The move was a legal masterstroke. William used existing clauses in the Crown Estate Act to argue that major royal properties required long-term planning that extended past the current reign. Because the Prince of Wales is the legal heir to the Crown's physical assets, the courts agreed that his office had a right to co-manage those assets in real time. Senior courtiers at Clarence House scrambled to organize a response. They attempted to reach the King's primary legal team at Lincoln's Inn, hoping to challenge the directive before the embargo lifted at noon. But the lawyers delivered a brutal reality check. The King had already seen the draft. More importantly, he had agreed not to veto it. Before releasing the statement to the press, William had met privately with his father in the library at Sandringham House. The Prince of Wales brought 2 thick binder folders with him to the meeting. The first contained a complete financial breakdown of the Duchy of Cornwall's operations over the previous 12 months. The second contained a detailed list of private advisors operating inside Clarence House. William placed the second folder on the coffee table between them. He did not raise his voice. He handed his father a direct ultimatum regarding Camilla's personal inner circle. He told the King that 3 of Camilla's top informal advisors were actively attempting to secure long-term funding from royal trust funds for their own private projects. William stated plainly that if those advisors were not stripped of their access to palace infrastructure immediately, he would cut off all duchy funding for their operational expenses. The King looked at the names in the folder. He realized his son was not guessing. William had conducted a complete internal audit of palace expenditure without notifying Clarence House. The evidence was clear, precise, and impossible to refute. Charles understood he had no leverage. He could either support his wife's private circle and face a public battle over royal finances, or he could sign off on William's directive and maintain the public stability of his reign. He chose stability. He promised William he would not interfere with the new executive committee. When the embargo lifted at midday, the media reported the statement as a major modernization drive by the young royals. News anchors praised William and Catherine for streamlining the monarchy and introducing corporate-level transparency to the Crown's business affairs. Behind the scenes, the fallout was instant. Within 2 hours of the announcement, 3 senior staff members attached to Camilla's private office received formal notifications from the Lord Chamberlain. Their security clearances for the administrative wing of Buckingham Palace were officially downgraded. They were informed that their presence was no longer required at future planning meetings for the royal household's estate management. Camilla was furious when she discovered the security downgrades. She immediately demanded an emergency audience with the King. But when she entered his private study, she found her husband sitting alone at his desk, reviewing a copy of the newly published directive. Charles did not offer to overturn his son's decision. He simply handed her the document and asked her to read the new regulations carefully. As the reality of the shift settled over Clarence House, a new wave of panic swept through Camilla's remaining loyalists. They had lost control of the warrants, the historic vaults, and the trust funds, but they still held one major advantage: their close daily access to the King himself. They began planning a subtle counter-strategy. If they could not block William's directives legally, they would focus on isolating the Prince of Wales from the King's daily schedule. They hoped to convince Charles that his son was pushing him out of his own monarchy. That strategy depended entirely on keeping the King's personal schedule tightly controlled by Clarence House staff. But William had already anticipated their next move. Before leaving Sandringham, the Prince of Wales had secured the explicit support of 2 senior members of the royal family who held massive influence over the King's personal life. Who were the 2 royal figures who stepped forward to enforce William's new rules inside the palace walls? Camilla's inner circle faces an immediate royal lockout. A physical keycard reader beeped twice outside the private administrative wing of Clarence House on a damp Thursday morning. Princess Anne stepped through the security door, carrying a navy canvas folder. Behind her walked Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh. They did not request an escort from the duty officer. They walked straight down the main corridor toward the offices used by Queen Camilla's senior advisors. The 2 royals were executing a direct order from the King's private council. Within 10 minutes, they met with 4 of Camilla's top aides. Anne placed 4 white envelopes on the central conference table. Inside, each envelope was an official notice terminating their access to all future Crown Committee meetings. The aides were told to clear their desks by 5 that afternoon. Their digital clearance codes for the palace intranet were deactivated while they sat in the room. This was the enforcement phase of Prince William's new charter. The Prince of Wales knew that changing rules on paper was useless if the same courtiers kept managing daily affairs. He needed senior family members to execute the operational cleanup. Princess Anne and Prince Edward were the perfect choices. Both held massive respect across the household, and both had long argued for a strictly streamlined monarchy. Camilla's chief strategist tried to challenge the decision on the spot. He argued that only the reigning monarch had the legal authority to revoke staff appointments paid through the sovereign grant. Princess Anne did not argue. She opened her navy folder and pulled out a yellowing sheet of paper dated 1997. The document was a private memo written by Queen Elizabeth II shortly after the death of Princess Diana. The late queen had anticipated future tension over royal households. She explicitly wrote that the reigning monarch's children and the immediate heir hold collective veto power over any non-lineal staff appointments if those appointments threaten the public standing of the crown. The memo carried the late queen's personal cipher. It had sat inside the royal archives at Windsor for nearly 3 decades. Anne had retrieved it herself the previous afternoon. The sight of the late queen's handwriting shut down all further debate. The legal precedent was bulletproof. The aides realized their time inside the inner circle was over. By 1 o'clock, news of the lockout reached Camilla's private quarters. She tried to reach her husband, but her call was intercepted by the king's duty physician. Charles was resting under strict medical advice after a rigorous treatment session. He had explicitly instructed his medical team not to disturb him with household business until evening. Camilla then tried to contact the Duke of Richmond to coordinate a media strategy, but her private phone lines to external advisors had been rerouted through the main palace switchboard. Every external call now required routine logging by the master of the household. The isolation was total and immediate. William and his allies had systematically cut off every avenue of resistance within 6 hours. As the dismissed aides packed their belongings into cardboard boxes, a quiet scene unfolded in the courtyard below. A white van belonging to a secure shredding firm backed up to the side entrance of Clarence House. 2 security guards supervised bags of internal correspondence were loaded into the rear. The palace was actively purging the old operational structures before the next quarter's financial accounts were finalized. By 4 in the afternoon, Princess Anne walked into Kensington Palace to brief Catherine. The Princess of Wales was sitting at her office desk reviewing draft schedules for the upcoming autumn tour season. Anne handed over a signed confirmation sheet verifying that all 4 security badges had been destroyed. The operational lockout was complete. Camilla's private court had been dismantled without a single public dispute. However, one major question remained hanging over the entire operation. What was the exact content of those private letters Princess Anne pulled from the archives, and why did they cause King Charles to completely stand down when his wife appealed for his help? King Charles caught between his beloved wife and his future king. A brass clock struck 6 in the afternoon inside the garden room at Burke Hall. King Charles sat near a stone fireplace, holding a faded green folder tied with black ribbon. Across from him sat Princess Anne. She had driven 3 hours through rain from Gatcombe Park to hand-deliver the letters herself. She did not bring tea. She did not offer pleasantries. She opened the ribbon and laid 3 handwritten pages on the small table between them. The handwriting belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. The pages were dated November 12th, 1999, just 2 days after Charles and Camilla made their first public appearance together outside the Ritz Hotel. Charles picked up the top page. He adjusted his glasses and read the 3rd paragraph out loud. The late queen had laid out strict instructions for her son's eventual reign. She wrote that, while she accepted his personal devotion to Camilla, the institution of the crown must never be compromised by competing courts. She specifically stated that any spouse who entered the family later in life must hold a strictly supportive role. She warned that allowing a consort to build an independent political base inside the palace would divide the household and destabilize the heir's authority. The letter explicitly stated that if a conflict ever arose between the consort's staff and the Prince of Wales, the monarch was bound by oath to back the prince. The words were precise. They left no room for interpretation. Princess Anne watched her brother read the passage twice. She reminded him that Queen Elizabeth had made them both promise to enforce those exact guidelines if the monarchy ever faced internal fracturing. This was the reason Charles stood down when Camilla appealed for his help. He was not just facing a challenge from Prince William, he was facing the explicit command of his late mother, written in her own ink nearly 3 decades earlier. At 7 that evening, Queen Camilla entered the room. She saw the green folder on the table. She recognized the black ribbon instantly. She knew what those documents represented. She asked Charles directly if he intended to let William and Catherine rewrite her court's operational mandates. Charles placed the pages back inside the folder. He told her that the arrangements made by William were legally sound and historically necessary. He explained that his primary duty was to ensure a smooth transition for the monarchy, even if that required painful sacrifices inside their immediate household. Camilla argued that removing her advisors made her look powerless in front of the public and the press. She pointed out that she had worked tirelessly for 2 decades to build public trust after years of hostility. She reminded him of the relentless media storms she had weathered by his side, from the turbulent 90s through their long battle for official acceptance. To have her office dismantled by her stepson felt like a public stripping of her dignity. Charles did not argue back. He reached for his desk calendar and pointed to his medical schedule for the upcoming month. He reminded her that his physical energy was limited. He was managing rigorous cancer treatments alongside his constitutional duties. He could not spend his remaining strength fighting his own son over administrative control of the royal estates. The reality hit Camilla hard. Charles was choosing the long-term survival of the crown over the short-term comfort of his wife. He was a king carrying a serious illness, trying to secure his family's legacy before his time ran out. Supporting William was the only way to guarantee that stability. He knew that an open feud between Clarence House and Kensington Palace would destroy the public trust he had spent his entire life waiting to build. Camilla looked at the green folder sitting between them. She realized that the late Queen's shadow still governed the rules of the house. No matter her title, no matter her years of service, the bloodline of succession would always take precedence over the marriage vow. By 8 o'clock, Camilla left the garden room alone. She walked down the cold stone corridor to her private study and called her remaining personal assistant. She instructed her to stop all pending appeals regarding the royal warrants. She ordered her team to cancel the scheduled strategy meetings with the Lord Chamberlain's staff. The fight was over. Charles remained in the garden room until late that night. He tied the black ribbon back around the green folder and locked it inside his personal red dispatch box. He had saved his household from an open civil war, but at a massive personal cost. The dynamic inside his marriage had permanently changed. A quiet distance settled into the private apartments at Burke Hall, one that no official statement could ever fully smooth over. The king had made his choice. He had chosen the future king over his queen consort. But as the new structure took effect across every royal residence, one final question began to circulate among the palace legal teams. What happens to Queen Camilla's formal status, her residence rights, and her income the exact moment Prince William takes the throne? The final line in the sand for the next generation. A white binder containing 24 sealed pages arrived at the Privy Council office on July the 15th, 2026. Attached to the front cover was a silver seal stamped with the joint insignia of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Inside were the finalized transitional protocols signed by Prince William, Princess Catherine, and King Charles. The document laid out the exact constitutional steps for the next reign. It contained one specific clause that solved the mystery surrounding Queen Camilla's future status. Clause 6 establishes that upon the king's death, Camilla's administrative title officially reverts to Queen Dowager. She will receive no ongoing income from the Duchy of Lancaster or the sovereign grant. Her personal funding will be drawn strictly from a private trust, established by King Charles during his lifetime. Furthermore, her primary residence will automatically shift from Clarence House to Ray Mill House, her private countryside estate in Wiltshire. She will retain use of a small private apartment at Kensington Palace, but she will hold zero administrative veto power over royal property, staff appointments, or official schedules. The secret clause inside the document that caused so much panic among courtiers had done its work. It officially restricted any non-lineal royal from holding permanent administrative veto power over the monarch's estate, effectively ending the era of informal court influences. The transitional paperwork permanently sealed the legal boundary William and Catherine set out to create. The public reaction to the Highgrove Charter was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Media outlets across London praised the Prince and Princess of Wales for taking decisive action to streamline the future monarchy. Polling numbers published by major news networks showed an 8% rise in public support for William's modernizing vision. Commentators noted that William and Catherine were not merely preparing for the throne in secret. They were actively demonstrating the kind of firm, institutional leadership the nation expected from its modern leaders. The public recognized that the next generation of royals was not waiting in the wings. They were actively managing the crown's business in real time. Inside the palace, the atmosphere transformed within days. Senior private secretaries who previously reported to Clarence House began directing all long-term strategic plans directly to Kensington. The administrative channels that once flowed through Camilla's personal aides were quietly rerouted to William's executive team. Staff members who had spent months navigating the competing demands of two separate royal courts were given clear, unified instructions. The power dynamic inside the institution had permanently shifted to the young royals. William and Catherine had successfully protected the future of the House of Windsor without causing a public scandal. They proved that they possessed the strategic sharp edge required to safeguard the monarchy for their children, ensuring that Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis will inherit a streamlined and secure institution. By late July, the new protocols were fully integrated into daily palace routine. The quarterly budgets were reassigned, the security clearances were permanently updated, and the official registers were updated across all royal residences. Camilla spent more time at her private retreat in Wiltshire, stepping back from the daily administrative battles of the London households. While she continued to support the king on official engagements, her influence over the long-term mechanics of the crown had effectively reached its end. The line in the royal sand had been drawn in permanent ink. The transition of power was no longer a distant theoretical plan. It was an active, everyday reality, unfolding across every palace corridor. William had sent a clear message to every faction within the institution. The future of the British monarchy belongs to his generation, and he will govern it on his own terms. William and Catherine have drawn a firm line in the royal sand, proving that the future of the British monarchy is already being shaped by their hands. Was this a necessary move to protect the crown, or did they go too far with Queen Camilla? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay ahead of every major royal update, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community today. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next deep dive.